Hey folks, welcome to another part in this Call of Duty style loadout tutorial series. Now in this part, we're going to take a look at how to update the camera via the UI. Folks, we are really close on 1000 subscribers and I would really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button so that we can reach this milestone together. Again, I really appreciate all of your effort and your time you put in to watch these videos, and I really do want to keep making more and more. So hit that like button, which allows me to make more and more videos like this and also reach out to more and more developers just like you. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a button on our loadout so that we can start selecting our loadouts. So to do that, let's go to our loadout system folder and then go to the UI. And inside of here on W loadouts, you're going to go to your individual sections. So one for your primary weapon and sidearm, melee, and so on and so forth. And you're going to add a button on it. How you would do that is in your primary section, let's close out the rest of them. In your primary, remember our primary is actually an overlay. So what we could do is we can go and search for a button and then drag this button on top of the actual primary overlay. This will add a button at the very bottom of the primary overlay. And then now we're going to go ahead and rename this to primary underscore button as in BTN. And we're going to go ahead and make this fill. That'll fill the entire box. And then the opacity of it, the background color in the color and opacity, the background color, we're going to make it 0. So that'll become invisible. And now you effectively have a button to select that actual weapon. We're going to do the same thing here. Drag a button on top of the sidearm here. And then we have your button here. And now we're going to name this sidearm underscore button, BTN. And then make the opacity of that button 0. And then also make it fill. Now fills the entire button. Now we can close out this primary and the sidearm, and now we can do the same thing for our melee. Select the button and then name this melee underscore BTN. Make the opacity 0 and then make it fill. That'll fill the entire melee weapon. And now for our lethals, we're going to do the same thing. Drag a button onto our lethals. I can also drag a button onto my tacticals while I'm doing this. Select the lethals button and then name this lethals underscore BTN. Make sure it's set to is variable because we need to work with that. And then also our background opacity, we're going to make it 0 and make it fill all the way through. The tacticals button we just dropped in here, we're going to go ahead and name this tacticals underscore BTN. Make it fill. And our background color, we're going to make it 0. And next, we're going to do our perks. And then perk 1, perk 2, and perk 3 will have its own button. So I'm going to drop a button onto perk 1. And then drop a button onto perk 2. And then another one on top of perk 3. And the button for perk 1, I'm going to name this perk 1 underscore BTN. Same deal. We're going to make it opacity 0 and fill the entire box. Select our perk 2 and then go ahead and say perk 2 underscore BTN. Make it fill and set the opacity to 0. And the last button that we have is our perk 3 underscore BTN. We're going to fill it and also make it opacity 0. So now we have effectively added a button on every single one of these loadouts. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my wrap box, open up my primary button, click on it, and scroll down, and then there is an option for on clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and then that will create a on clicked primary button event. And I would do the same thing for the rest of the buttons that we have, just so that we have a button function for every single buttons that we have. So select the sidearm button and then go ahead and click on this, and it will create a on-clicked sidearm button. Same thing for the melee. Scroll down, click on on-clicked. I'll create that. Lethals, on-clicked. Tacticals, perk 1 button, perk 2 button, Last but not least is the perk 3 button. So now what we have effectively created is a function for every single button so that when the primary button gets pressed, something happens, secondary button gets pressed, we can notify secondary has been clicked and such. Now we have to do so many different functionalities when the buttons are clicked. The first functionality that we're going to do is to notify our loadout scene to rotate the camera to look at that specific equipment. To do that, first we need to send out a message. We're going to use our interface to send out the message. So let's go back to our loadout system, blueprints, and let's go to our BPI loadout. And then let's create a new notification. And we're going to name this UI underscore loadout underscore on click. Now, we want to notify through this interface which button was actually clicked. And there's multiple different ways to do this. The easiest way that I'm going to show you is to use an enumeration. So to do that, I'm going to first go ahead, right click, and then search for an enumeration. Name this E underscore loadout class. Open this up, and then we're going to add a whole bunch of enumeration here. First one is going to be our primary. The second one is going to be our secondary. Secondary sidearm, same thing. Next is going to be our melee. And then we have our lethals class, our tacticals. We have perk 1, perk 2, and then perk 3. So these are all our classes that we have in a loadout. Now, if you have like the field upgrades and stuff like that, you would add it in here. So I'm going to go ahead into our BPI loadout interface. On the UI loadout on clicked, I'm going to go ahead and select the input and then set up a class. And this class would be that E loadout class that we just created. Now, this is the first thing that we're going to do. Now, again, there's so many more inputs and outputs that we will add in the future as we need to. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that and then go back to my loadout class and then set this up. Now we want to be able to communicate it directly to the player that we have clicked the primary button and also to the loadout scene that we have pressed this primary button. So we're going to first do the loadout scene. We're going to use a function to notify this. So we're going to create a new function and then name this notify underscore loadout scene underscore on click. Right? And here we're going to go ahead and say, drag off of this and say get actor out class. And this would be our loadout scene, right? BP loadout scene. Now, if you drag off of this and then say UI underscore loadout on clicked, you won't get a message here because it's inside of a function and we're trying to get an actor of class. To override this, you can simply go ahead and say get player character and then drag off of the player character. And then now, if you were to say UI underscore loadout on clicked, you'll get the loadout message here. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this. And then I'm going to select our function here and then add in a new input and then name this class. And then this would be of our type E underscore loadout class. And now we're going to drag this class and then we're going to connect it here and the return value to the target. And now we can compile. Now what this does is if we go back to your event graph, I'm going to drag this notify loadout scene on clicked. And then here, I'm going to set this to primary. And then I'm going to copy and paste this. And on secondary, when I click on it, I'm going to go ahead and say secondary. Now it gives me that drop-down menu, and this is what we wanted. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the rest of them. So now we have successfully notified our actual loadout scene that these are the buttons that we have clicked. So now let's go and work on the loadout scene and then let's move the camera based on the buttons that are clicked. So go to your content drawer, go to the loadout scene folder, and then open up the actual loadout scene. Here at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead, go to our interfaces, and then right click on this UI loadout on clicked, implement the event. Now, we want to go ahead and utilize this update camera position function. And then instead of having to manually select the weapons here, I'm going to go ahead and then use that function, blueprint. So I'm going to delete this weapon main, select our update camera position, and add in an input. This input would be our mesh input, and then the type would be our static mesh component. And then drag the static mesh component and then connect it to the calculate camera position. And down here on event UI on clicked, I'm going to go ahead and drag off of this class, and then I'm going to do a select node on this. What this select node does is it will give you a list of everything that's in that actual enumeration, and you get to select what you want to output based on each and every single selection. So we want to output the actual mesh. So the easiest way to do it is to drag the mesh from here and then connect it to these nodes. And then everything else will take the component type of the actual primary node that you just connected. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Secondary node, I'm going to connect it to secondary here. The melee to the melee. We have our lethals, tacticals, perk 1, perk 2, and perk 3. Select all of it, and then if you press Q, it should line up like this very nicely. And then here, what I'm going to do is off of the event, I'm going to drag and say update camera position. And the update camera position should now have a mesh input, and that will be our return value here. Let's copy all of this, drag all of this further down, just to keep it nice and tidy. And that's that. So now when the button gets selected, the camera is going to be notified of this different type of mesh. We can actually test that here in just a moment. So go ahead and press play, press T, select loadout. The loadout looks good. Now if I go and hover over my custom loadout, if I click on AK, you see the camera is now rotating to look at the AK. If I select the pistol, the camera switches to the pistol. Melee, it's going to switch to the melee. Grenade, tacticals. Perk 1 is the bag for perk 1, bag for perk 2, and bag for perk 3. It doesn't look the best in terms of the camera position, and this is where we're going to use our offsets to move the camera left and right based on our final position. So now one thing that I do want to fix there is if I go up here in this alpha camera position, I want to set this to 2 seconds so it has a nice little move, right? And the calculate camera position, where it says play, we're going to set it to play from start. So it always goes from 0 to 2. So if I go press play now, and if I press T, loadout on this, I select the camera, it'll go like that. And pistol, you see how the camera actually does the movement. Grenade, tacticals, perk 1, perk 3, perk 2, so on and so forth, right? Back to the grenade, back to the smoky. So folks, I think this is a great stop for us in this tutorial video. In the next video, we're going to start building our weapon select UI and also the functionality of it. So please hit that subscribe button if you want to be notified when that video gets released as well. Again, thank you very much for coming this far in this video tutorial series. I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one.